Welcome back to my Zodiac charm series. Today we are making a beginner-friendly and easily customizable resin charm gift for the Gemini in our lives using colors associated with their sign. I will be using the silicone mold and some mica pigments for this project. My resin is mixed, decanted and ready for use. I will divide the resin into roughly 3 equal parts. The Gemini color palette is comprised of mainly 3 colors: silvery grey, yellow and light green. The quantity of pigment is just enough to cut the resin's transparency and give it body, but not so much as to make the mix opaque and stop light from passing through. I am going to use yellow and green to express the twins and the silvery grey as a binder and divider of the two faces. A little more color on both the sides to make the grey separating the two colors a little more defined. Heat gun to deal with the surface bubbles wasn't enough, so I had to use my long neck lighter to pop stubborn bubbles. Finally, it is time for my trusty toothpick to swirl the pigments a little, simply because it's fun to do so. And I am always curious if the swirl definition will stay or eventually fade away as the resin cures. Now we will leave this to cure overnight and continue tomorrow. My resin charm is all cured and ready to be demolded. There is a little climb along the edges. Let's unpack this Zodiac. The rest of the surface seems to be bubble-free and smooth. The colors are looking lovely. Nice! I can see the swirls in the head of the twins. Loving this abstract effect. It looks like they are thinking. Some stray pigments here, but it is not damaging the look of this Zodiac charm. This jagged profile needs to be fixed before moving on to the next stage. First, we will sand down this edge and then the surface will be domed, after which I will introduce the constellation onto this face. This sanded surface creates a cleaner edge detail, especially if you are using different resins for the body and for doming. For sealing the surface, I will be using epoxy resin. There was a little accident. There was some spill from another resin piece which was curing next to my Gemini Zodiac charm. Now they are fused together with clear epoxy resin. The edges are really close together, but there is still a gap and I think I might be able to rescue them. managed to separate them successfully. I heated the piece with my heat gun, which softened the resin and made it easier for me to slice through the spill and separate these two pieces. Now some damage control to get the edge detail corrected by removing any jagged edges. Time to sand the front surface and make it a little rough. I will be working on this edge with UV resin. Sanding gives the surface a better grip. Now this face is prepped, let's make our constellation. I have the constellation mapped on this paper, which I'm going to use as a design guide for positioning my stars, which will be represented by this crafting caviar. The most striking feature of this constellation visible to the naked eye are its two brightest stars. Meet Pollux. This is the brighter of the two twin stars. It is an evolved orange giant star about 34 light years away. For those interested in stargazing, the constellation of Gemini is best seen during the winter months in the northern hemisphere and the summer months in the southern hemisphere. This star is Castor, slightly dimmer than Pollux and appears whitish or bluish white. While it looks like a single star to the naked eye, it is actually a complex system of 6 stars bound together gravitationally about 51 light years away. Castor and Pollux form the heads of the twins, and with a dark sky, you can often trace out the rest of the constellation, which resembles two stick figures standing side by side. My constellation is ready for installation. Wow, that rhymes. Let's mount this onto the silicone stick so that I can move it around while I'm working on this surface. First, I will add the constellation in place. The constellation might have curled a little because UV resin shrinks under UV light while curing. So I have to make sure that it is evenly lying on the surface. Now, let's have a look at some of the edges which were filed earlier to remove the spilled resin. I will fix this quickly with some UV resin. I am brushing a very thin coat carefully, keeping within the edge because I don't want to accidentally spoil the side which has already been finished. Now that my constellation is in place, let's seal this surface with a dome of UV resin. The reference to Gemini as the twins in Greek mythology stems from the story of the inseparable brothers, Castor and Pollux, one mortal and one immortal, who were placed in the heavens by Zeus to remain together forever after Castor's death. My charm is now ready for final assembly. My charm is ready and looking beautiful. And what? There is some resin spill here. Since this surface was elevated, it has become a drop. Otherwise, it would have spread across the entire surface. Let's get my trusty cutter and fix this. I should be able to remove this easily because the base is epoxy and this was UV resin. See, this is why you need to sand the surface if you're planning to add a UV resin dome on an epoxy resin surface. There was no bonding. It was just another layer. It came right off, leaving the epoxy layer undamaged. If you're making your own charm and want more defined layers of colors, then just wait for 10 minutes after you have mixed your resin pigments so that they become a little viscous before pouring the resin into the mold. For a personal touch, you could add the name or the date of birth of the person you are gifting this charm to on the other side. Hope you enjoyed this video. Happy crafting and have a wonderful day.